Good afternoon, everybody. This is Gary Ritz, the Associate Director over at Ella Learning Center, and welcome to a parent seminar and webinar on post-midterm academic assistance. First thing, we apologize for the confusion on the timing. We know that this was originally, I think, advertised as 12 to 1, and we just had a difference in our calendar, so we apologize for that. But hopefully, those that weren't able to join us or can't join us for the whole thing can go onto YouTube and watch it through the Family Programs website as far as the link goes. Also, I want to make sure that if any point that the sound is not clear enough for you or it's not loud enough for you, please go to the chat box that's at the top of your screen and indicate that. So if you are currently on there and you cannot hear me, go ahead and put something in the chat box. Otherwise, we're going to assume that you're able to hear me clearly enough for that. Also, at any point during the webinar, if you do have a question that you need answered, please go to the top of the screen where it again says chat, and you can type in that question. Mark Pontius from Family Programs is here, and he'll relay that question on to me, and hopefully I can address that either during the webinar itself, during the slides, or at the end of the webinar when I have some time for questions in those cases. So today the objective is really to kind of talk about three different things that's related to post-midterms. Discussions on grades themselves and how to have that discussion with your child. Oftentimes we know that that's a difficult discussion to have, and so I'll give you some maybe ideas of how to do that. If your child is not doing what you expect or they expect, we'll talk about what can be done at this point of the semester, as well as then the different services that are available on campus that we would recommend for students to utilize if they are in an academically troubled situation in those cases. So first of all, just recently, midterm grades have been available to students. And so if they go into their My Miami and look at their grades, those were available on October 20th. So students do have access to them through the banner web. Faculty instructors of first-year students are highly encouraged to provide midterm grades. So if you have a child that is a first semester student, their instructors are highly encouraged and highly recommended to issue a grade to them. Upper level students, faculty instructors are still recommended to do that, but we see less and less like juniors and seniors receiving midterm grades in their banner web, but because that's really the discretion of the instructor or the faculty member at that point. One thing I want to highlight is that midterm grades do not count towards GPA calculations. So just because a student's grade it may be at a low level at this point doesn't mean that that's going to be counted at all into their GPA calculation. Only final grades at the end of the semester when they are submitted are counted towards GPA calculations for the student. The other date I'm going to highlight is also next Monday, and that is October 30th. That is the final withdrawal date here at Miami for students that are in classes for the fall semester, and that is for the entire fall semester. If a student is thinking about withdrawing from a class, the procedure to do the withdrawal is actually to send a detailed email to the instructor themselves. In that email, the student should list their name, should list the course that they're taking from that instructor, as well as the section, as well as I would always suggest the time and day that they have the student or they have that class so that the instructor can easily find them in their course lists. But the instructor then will withdraw them and honor that request at that point. After October 30th, there's just a lot more hoops that the student has to go through to actually formally withdraw from a course. They have to go through the instructor, go through the dean of that college, and so this does not take any additional hoops. They just simply have to email the instructor by Monday to indicate that they're going to withdraw from the course. Sometimes withdrawal is to the advantage of the student because a W does not count towards their GPA calculation. So if there is a class that the student has that there is no way possible that they think that they are going to be able to pass that class, sometimes it's better to take a W for that class rather than taking an F, because an F will count towards their GPA calculation at the end of the semester, where a W will not. A W does appear on their transcript if they desire to withdraw, though, from a course. Lastly, I always talk about this with students and parents as well. There may be some financial aid repercussions when it comes to withdrawing from a class, so it's always to the student's advantage to maybe stop at the one stop that is in the Campus Avenue building to request talking to somebody from financial aid to see whether that withdrawal could have any kind of implications to the student when it comes to receiving future aid in future semesters. So I want to spend a few minutes just talking about how to talk to your child about academics. The one thing when I've talked to parents in the past is that I always tell them not to be satisfied with four-letter answers. And so many of you probably have had that phone call with your child already and said, how are things going? And you typically get the answer of fine. Or, you know, how are classes going? Good. How's your instructors? Good. And so those are easy kind of cop-out answers that I think that students often give just to simply maybe not be able to be truthful in the situation or just to kind of pass the conversation along. So I say don't be satisfied with those type of answers. Dig deeper a little bit into the child's schedule, into their courses to kind of make a little bit better assessment of really how they're doing with their academics and with their courses. This first semester, if you have a first semester freshman, oftentimes students don't necessarily know what their educational or career goals are at this point, or even how to approach that goal, because they're transitioning to a whole new environment when it comes to academics. And so family members can be very crucial in at least helping them work towards creating small achievements. So in that conversation, it might be, you know, have you completed all the assignments for this class? Are there any extra credits in that class? But you're diving deeper into the classes to see if the student is really kind of looking at the details of the class rather than thinking of those generalized answers of everything's fine or everything is good. So we encourage parents to talk about with their students to dream big. Obviously, they want to be successful in all their courses and be successful as a college student here at Miami, but make sure they're preparing very small, looking at the details week to week. Have they gotten everything turned in on time? Are they attending class on a regular basis and not skipping classes? But those very small details can really make a difference of whether somebody is going to be successful during this crucial time in transition or in general as a college student here at Miami. And so if we think about accomplishing these very small achievements and talking to the students about these small achievements, an overall goal can be met because those small achievements will end up compiling to be a very large type of component with that student's academic life. So here's some suggestions that we have from the Learning Center here at Ranella about talking with your child about their academics. And so begin maybe asking about their achievements in classes. So what do they want to achieve maybe in a semester or in a certain course? What led them to successes in the past that they can implement some of those same type of things here in college? Especially if they were, first semester freshmen that were very successful in high school, maybe didn't have to work a lot in high school, but all of a sudden college is a big transition and kind of a smack in the face of what all they are expected to do. So looking at those achievements and saying, what did you do in the past that made you successful? Can you convey those same type of strategies from high school or previous semesters into the current semester in those cases as well? But notice I'm talking about concentrating on their achievements, making sure that they're feeling good about what they're doing, staying motivated in their classes because there is some success that can be seen in different areas of those courses that they're taking. Throughout the semester, we suggest parents to ask their child about successes as well as challenges, though. So are they preparing maybe for their exams or their assignments in the proper way? Oftentimes we hear students talk about that they study in the same way for exams that they studied in high school, the night before, or they just simply looked over their notes that morning of. And so in college, a lot of people are surprised that they maybe have to take 2 or 3 days and take a couple hours each day to kind of review the material to prepare themselves for an exam, or going to maybe review sessions such as SI sessions or review sessions that the instructor might have in order to better prepare themselves of going into to take that exam. Asking them what classes they're finding to be challenging, and in that same tone of, are they seeking help for those challenges? And so if they have not sought any kind of help for those challenges, instructing them to say, well, it's okay to ask for help. Probably the biggest challenge that we find students have is asking for help. because they've never had to do that before, or they don't think that they need that additional help, but oftentimes they get themselves dug in a hole that they can't dig themselves out because they didn't ask for help to begin with. So I always say it is an expectation that Miami has for students to ask for help when they need it, because otherwise we're not going to be able to assist them when they do need those different situations and help in those situations. And finally, to ask if they've considered meeting with other students, maybe in study groups, or considered getting a tutor. We'll talk about our Ranella services here in a few as far as the different things that we have to offer, but also a great question because we have what's called supplemental instruction. We kind of abbreviate that to be SI, and I'll talk about the details of that later, but that's a great question to ask because we have supplemental instruction with a lot of courses, and that is where we actually place a tutor in a class that we consider to be sometimes a high-risk class, and then those student leaders, those SI leaders, hold review sessions on a weekly basis for students to attend to get extra help for those coursework. And we'll talk a little bit more in detail about SI towards the end of, or towards the middle of the presentation here. If they are getting help or in a group, ask about the details about it. So if they are getting a tutor, ask about how that tutoring session is gone. If they are going to SI, ask about that because that's, again, diving deeper into the information about how they're seeking help and so on. The one thing I'll highlight before I change to the next slide, though, is if they are getting help from friends, they want to make sure that those friends are doing well in the classes to begin with. Oftentimes I ask students, you know, where do you seek help? And they'll say friends. I'm like, well, how is your friend doing in the class? And they're like, well, they're struggling too. And so we don't want to make sure that they're getting information that's going to be helpful to them. And so if they are forming a study group to help each other or to teach each other the material, to make sure that the others in that study group or those partnerships are doing well in the class as well, so that that way they are getting the help that they need and the correct information with the help that they need as well. Finally, about talking with academics is always, always, always congratulate them on their successes, no matter how small those successes are. We know that every student in Miami is successful in some way, no matter if it's small steps that they're taking to change, but we want to congratulate them on those successes and provide them constant encouragement to do better in those cases. And so that's something that you can be a partner with us for as well, is to congratulate them. Maybe it's just a small task of, you know, that they attended all of their classes this one week, but all the way through how did they study and what they got on the exam was a lot better than what they anticipated, or they did better on maybe a quiz compared to their first quiz. So those little successes can, and the congratulations of those, can keep that student motivated and encourage them to continue to be successful in other ways. So what can be done at this point? So if you have had the conversation with your child about midterm grades, maybe both of you aren't necessarily satisfied with where they stand with those midterm grades, these are the things that can be done possibly to finish out the semester or to seek help in those cases. The very first thing we always say at Ranella Learning Center is that they need to start having the conversations, first of all, with their instructors or professors during their office hours. This is their primary resource for the class. That is the expert of the class. And so when students come to Ranella to talk maybe with a tutor or SI leader, yes, those students have probably had that course before, they know that content, but every instructor is a little different in how they teach that content. And maybe the tutor that we have on our staff didn't necessarily take the class with that specific instructor that has specific expectations for their student. So we always say that their primary resource, their primary expert for the course is their instructor or professor. And so in their syllabi at the beginning of the semester, the instructor should have placed in there when their office hours are for students to come in to discuss concepts and ask questions. Oftentimes we always say to students after a test, if they didn't do well on it, to go into the instructor's office hours to have that instructor go through the test with them so that way they can highlight those errors, maybe ask questions about that content, because more and more classes have content that builds on each other, and so by the time they get to maybe the second exam, third exam, final exam, all of those concepts might continue to be on those exams. And so if they don't understand the concept to begin with, that's going to kind of hurt them when it comes to later kind of assessments. So we always say to go in right after a test to see how they did and have that instructor maybe guide them through what they made mistakes on. Again, the office hours are listed in the course syllabus. If a student is kind of maybe not able to go in during office hours, maybe they have a class during that time or other commitments, excuse me, they can still contact that instructor by email. I would just simply have a word of advice to make sure that they use proper email etiquette when they are contacting their instructors. So again, placing in there their name, what class that they are taking, maybe even the day and time and section that they are taking, and then really word that question that they might have or that what they're kind of struggling with to that instructor in proper email etiquette, rather than maybe slang terms or how they're texting each other. That's not going to necessarily be very helpful when it comes to the instructor, and that instructor might not necessarily even pay close attention to it at that point. So again, to emphasize, this should be the very first contact if students are struggling, is to talk to that instructor. If the midterm is really, really low, that conversation is almost a must, because they need to contact that instructor to see whether there's enough points even to get through the rest of the semester and pass the course, or what it's going to take for them and what advice that instructor has for them to be able to pass the class if that midterm grade is not necessarily where it needs to be. The second thing that can be done is to form study groups. And so we know that in the residence halls, oftentimes students, especially first semester students, are taking some similar classes. Sometimes even in the living learning community, they might have classes together. And so we always say that it's beneficial to form study groups, because oftentimes we can learn from each other and learn the material better. We often tell students that one great metacognition strategy, which is a learning strategy, is to be able to teach the material to somebody else. And so even if it is somebody from a different class, they're covering the same topics, that gives that opportunity for the students to kind of interact in a way that they're teaching each other, which in a sense makes them learn the material a little bit better for future exams and future assignments. Again, they can talk to peers that are in class if nobody is in their residence hall to possibly form a study group together, or even sometimes classes have automatic groups that work on projects together, that can be an instant kind of study group to deal with. The student needs to not be, though, timid in asking others to form a study group. And so I think everybody kind of thinks, oh, they're on their own, or oftentimes students think, well, nobody else is struggling. Trust me, people are struggling. And a lot of the students are in the same situations that they are, and so they just need to take that initiative to ask to see whether a study group can be formed. We have tutoring that's involved, and we'll talk about that in a second, and oftentimes we have up to 3 people in a tutoring session, and what we have found is that those 3 people or those groups that even meet outside of the tutoring session, because they've built kind of a study group with the tutor, but then they work with each other outside of that tutoring time as well. Other things that can be done, one of the biggest things can be done is to improve the time management skills of the student. Oftentimes we talk to students and college students, and you probably hear this as well, that students claim that they're the most time-stressed people in the world, but most of the time it's that they have more time on their hands than ever, and they just never have been taught how to manage that time. If you think about in the high school setting, they're told where to be every single minute of the day, where now they might have just 2 classes on maybe Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and they have all this gap time in between or even before and after class, and just don't know what to do with it in that case. But they do have the time. It's just getting them to use it in effective ways rather than going back to maybe their halls, watching TV, playing video games, or sleeping, those type of things. So if a student does not have a planner or a calendar at this time, that could be a great help. That's something to ask your child whether they utilize a planner. But we even emphasize that not just putting in due dates into that planner, but putting in maybe a couple days before a reminder of when that assignment is due. Because oftentimes people, again, procrastinate to the last minute when they see that something is due or the next day type of thing. Also in their calendar, to place in blocks of time that they are going to set out to study, no matter if they have an assignment or not. And so if they don't have an assignment, so for an example, if maybe they're in a Math 151 and they block out 2 hours for working on the homework assignment, maybe it was just right after an exam and they don't have any homework assignment to deal with. That we still say keep your commitment to that time block, but use it for other things. Maybe it's organizing your information. Maybe it's reading text for a different class, reviewing notes, organizing those notes, getting a tutor and scheduling a tutor during those open time blocks. But if they consider, again, that as part of their normal schedule, then they're going to be prone not to drop that time if they don't have anything to do in those time periods. The other thing we're emphasizing this year is that students need to say no, and that's hard for students. They need to say no to people that come in and say, you know, why don't we go down and get something to eat, or, you know, why don't you watch this TV, or do you want to play video games? So students need to stay away from those distractions as much as possible. So I tell students just to tell the other person to say no, that they already have an appointment or a commitment. But it's really that commitment is to themselves, or the appointment is to themselves to work on academics. So if that means maybe leaving their hall to go to a different location on campus to utilize that time block and not be prone to those distractions, that's what we would say is a beneficial scenario. So they don't have to be rude to the other person. They can just simply say they have an appointment with somebody, but really that appointment's to themselves, and that's an easy way for them to be able to get that time alone to work on some things. The other thing is about time management is that the Rinella Learning Center has on its website some online resources related to time management and the self-help resources that's under academic support. So if you are wanting to look at our website while I'm talking, our website at miamioh.edu/learning is the easiest way, and that's /LEARNING. Or you can go to the main site of Miami, and just in the search box type in Rinella Learning Center or Tutoring or Academic Support, and probably we will pop up in one of the search engines there. Another thing is really kind of something that students oftentimes neglect, but it can have you know, large repercussions when it comes to their academics, and that's their self-care and their healthy lifestyle. Oftentimes I'm hearing students say, well, I'm pulling an all-nighter, or I'm not really eating the way I used to be, or not getting, you know, I'm not eating lunch at all, or I'm not eating breakfast at all. I'm going right to class, you know, waking up, you know, early, but not necessarily going to bed early. And so students need to really think about, you know, what's their physical, emotional, and mentality state in order to be able to perform at their best in those cases. And so reminding them of proper nutrition and exercise and sleep can be something that you can help us with. But there are resources on campus. The Student Health Center, if a student isn't feeling very well, they do have access to that. Our Counseling Center on campus, if they're struggling emotionally or mentally with some things and need somebody to help them with that, we do have our Counseling Center. And of course, we do have the Rec Center for exercise, or, you know, it's been nice so far, just recently gotten cool, but to you know, go out, take walks, and just kind of keep that in mind, that does have repercussions if they aren't taking care of themselves in the correct way. Other things that can be done, one thing that, especially if they're going to consider a withdrawal, and right now also students are considering registration for spring classes, that we always recommend having a meeting with their divisional academic advisor that's within their college of their major or within their college that they have been tied to. Within that, they can talk about their college their major area of choice, if there's, you know, maybe questions about changing majors and how that can affect them. But time tickets for registration start, I believe, next week is the first set of those. Students should have gotten their time ticket of when they can go online to register for classes, but we always recommend talking to an academic advisor prior to doing that, so that way they're set up to make sure that they're planning in the correct way for future semesters and taking the courses that they need to be taking. Oftentimes also the student can talk to them about our course repeat policy. So if a student does get below a C- in a course within their early years or early semesters at Miami, Miami does allow them to take up to 2 classes, and I believe it's up to 9-10 credit hours for those 2 classes to do a repeat policy, which means that they can repeat the course in a future semester. If they do better in that course, then the grade from the first attempt can be dropped out of their GPA calculation, and the new grade can be placed into the GPA calculation. So it's if that first attempt wasn't even part of their coursework. However, that initial grade does still appear on their transcript as a first attempt. It's just not calculated into their GPA, so retaking a course and doing better in it can definitely have an improvement for their GPA in the future. So if there is a class at the end of the semester where the student does not do well, that is a possibility of retaking it, and then their GPA can be recalculated without that first attempt in the process. An academic advisor can step the student through that process, and so that's what we would recommend, is having that discussion over the next week or so, even to deal with that registration process that's upcoming. The other resource on campus, if a student is not registered but thinks they have a disability or has been to a physician, psychologist, psychiatrist, and has a condition that hasn't been documented through Miami, that office is the Student Disability Office or SDS office where that has to be done. So if a student has the disability, it's been documented, they require some kind of accommodations, and that could mean a lot of different things. It could be a testing accommodation where students can have a distraction-reduced testing environment or have extra time, maybe time and a half or double time on their testing. The SDS office is who processes that documentation and sets those accommodations up. Other type of accommodations are for maybe in-class accommodations, such as maybe they get extended time to turn in assignments, maybe they get some accommodations when it comes to attendance. Those are type of things that you have the student has a discussion with a staff member in the SDS office to come up with a plan and what accommodations that they can utilize in order to be successful in those courses. And so if you do have questions about that process, I encourage you to contact the Student Disability Services office or have a meeting, have the student set up a meeting with somebody in that office to explain that process. And lastly, what can be done is really using different academic resource help that's on campus. And so I'm putting 3 different things up there, but then I'll talk about our services specifically for Ranella in the time that I have remaining here, and then save some questions at the end here. If a student has a paper or struggles with some writing, I know a lot of first semester freshmen, as well as even in second semester, they have to take English 111 as part of the foundation of the My Miami plan. However, oftentimes a lot of classes have 2 to 4 page papers due or more in a class as a final project, and those might be coming up here towards the end of the semester. We encourage students to use the How Writing Center. That is the main tutoring center for writing assignments, and it can be in any subject area and in any class. I've included the website there for students to be able to go to, or you can investigate it as well, but the students actually will make their appointments online through that website. But the main How Writing Center location is in the King Library, and so you can also call them if they have questions, and so I've included the phone number there. How does, though, have some satellite centers spread out throughout the campus, and so there might be a satellite center where there might be help in different locations on campus. Their website hopefully would indicate where those different satellite centers are and what is required in order to meet. We don't suggest students just simply to go in there and say, I just need this to be done for me at all, or, can you help me write this? Really, they're there to help the student kind of formulate their ideas, maybe organize their ideas, and to do a paper, possibly a paper review at the end when the student is about to turn the assignment in or the writing assignment in. Then a student tutor can look over that paper for them, offer suggestions, and so on before turning that in. So I always suggest that if a student is not a strong writer or it is a major paper worth a lot of points in a class, to have the paper reviewed prior to turning that assignment in. So thinking about if a student has a large paper due at the end of the semester, they may want to think about getting an appointment early to make sure that there's plenty of time for them to review the paper before it is due in that case, rather than waiting the last minute. Second thing that happens also oftentimes within the departments of the courses, that there are help and tutoring sessions that the individual departments actually offer to students. And so this would be a question to ask maybe during office hours by the student to the instructor to say, is there any help that the department itself offers to students? An example of this that I put on there is that the math department does have evening help sessions for students where they have a GA, a graduate students that is in Bachelor Hall 118 for Math 151 students, and we know that's a class that oftentimes students struggle with, and so that is on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. The R stands for Thursday at that point. Other departments kind of do this, but they don't necessarily advertise it out to us to know. This is one that we definitely know happens from the math department. That's where, again, the student, if they are struggling in a certain area, may want to talk to their instructor or that department office to see whether there's any graduate assistance within that department that helps students with individual tutoring or group tutoring, or, again, have help sessions that are periodic like the math department does in that case. And then the other academic resource is really what I'm representing, and that's the Ranella Learning Center, and there's our website. We are located now in the Shriver Center. We actually moved there last January, and so if a student is an upper class student, we used to be in the CAB or Campus Avenue building, and so now we are in the third floor of the Shriver Center. That is the phone number to our main office if there's questions, and we'll talk about the different resources then that we do offer here in the next few slides. So the services and assistance specifically to our Learning Center is, first of all, we do have tutoring available, of course. Available in a variety of the 100, 200 level courses. We cannot say that we offer tutoring in every single course. That would be almost an impossibility for us to do with the budget that we have and the resources that we have. But we do try to target specifically courses that we know have been high-risk courses. And when I say high-risk, that means that historically, maybe a lot of students have gotten Ds or Fs or withdrawn from the course, and we know that the content is possibly very difficult for the student and so on. We do have individual and group tutoring depending on the course and what we're dealing with in that case. If we are dealing with a group tutoring, we try to limit that to 2 or 3 per group. At the max, and so that way, again, everybody's still getting individual attention, plus we're able to kind of, help each other out in those cases. And so in the bottom left-hand corner is our tutoring space, so you'll notice that we do have some groups going on, have whiteboards around, that it's a very interactive space, and so on. Our tutors, often people ask about who they are. They are student tutors. We do not hire any professional tutors or anything like that. They are student tutors that have taken the courses here at Miami. And at least have a GPA of 3.0 or above. We have pooled our tutors in the past, and typically our average GPA of all of our tutors is around actually a 3.5 or a 3.6, and so that's our bare minimum requirement in those cases. To get a tutor, what a student does is they go onto our website, and so if you open up our website, you'll notice right in the middle of the website it does say request a tutor, and so we do have an online appointment registration process. So the student can go on to that site, they will type in their username in it, and then it will bring up all of the different courses that they are currently taking. They would select the course that they need help with, and then it's populated on the screen then with all of our available openings for the next basically week and a half in those cases. I will warn you that right now we are at peak season as far as tutoring goes. Usually weeks 7 and week 8 are our top weeks of our tutoring because students get their tests back or get their midterm grades and they get the uh-oh moment. And they are like, well, now I better ask for help in those cases. And so you can see even just current numbers through last week that so far in our tutoring center we have helped 806 students, and that's up 9% compared to last fall. And we've actually had 2,828 visits to our tutoring center, and that's up 27%. So what that tells me is that more students are coming, but there's coming more often. And so that's satisfying to me that they are getting the help that they desire, that our tutors are being trained to help them in unique ways, and that the students are coming back more often in those cases. Students are not limited as far as how many appointments they have, and it is all free to students. There's no additional charge whatsoever as far as getting a tutor. And they can also make what we call recurring appointments. And that's what's happened this semester more than anything else. Students actually took some of our advice over summer orientation and started scheduling their tutors early. So our week 3 and week 4 numbers were really high because they were getting in and having tutors help them for that first round of tests. But they can make that then what we call a recurring appointment where they have the same tutor reserved for them every week all semester long. So those proactive students that were seeking help are kind of keeping those appointments. However, there are Some still openings, and depending on the class that's out there, but it is filling up fast, especially through these weeks right after midterm time. If we do not have a tutor for a class that the student is requesting, they'll get a message to contact our tutor coordinator, and so they can email our tutoring coordinator, and we can either pool our tutors to see if anybody can tutor that class that we might not necessarily have in our listing, or to see whether there's other options or other assistances available to that student. The other program that I'm going to highlight is our Supplemental Instruction program, and so many of you might not necessarily know what that's about in that case, but these are offered for what we call historically difficult courses. I'm just going to run through the list of courses that we currently have SI for. Now, not every section in those course areas have an SI leader, but I'll talk about what that means and how we basically select those situations. So the courses that we're currently offering SI in are Bio and MBI 115, Bio 161, Chem 141, Chem 241, Chem 251, Math 104, Math 151, Math 222, Math 245, Math 249, Math 251, Math 252, Math 349, Math 347, Econ 201, and Physics 101 and Physics 191. Now that was a pretty long list. We do have that list posted on our website, and that list will detail which sections of that course that we're offering SI with. And what that means is that we find a student who's taken that class before, been very successful in that course, and been recommended by the instructor, and we hire them to sit in the class again with the students. So the student leader, the SI leader, will take notes just like everybody else. They will listen to the lecture just like everybody else, but that student leader will hold 2 out-of-class review sessions every week for students to be able to go to. It's free of charge to go to hear the material again, to work on problems together, to kind of, maybe preview what's going to be on the exam or on the next quiz. The student leader knows what's going on in that class day to day because they're attending it with the students, and they're working closely with the instructor as well to know what to cover during those SI review sessions. The SI review sessions were told to students at the beginning of the semester. They are posted on our website, and they're often held in the building or in a classroom in the building where the student's class actually is. And so those vary throughout campus, but they are listed on our website. And so that is a great question to ask your child is, are you in an SI section, especially if you noticed any of the courses that I listed there, to see whether they have an SI leader for their class and whether they're attending those review sessions. What we have found, and we've done research every semester, is that students that go to these SI sessions that are in those courses typically get about a half a grade higher than the students in the same class that choose not to attend those. And so we know it works. We know that the students are working on the material, getting questions answered, and so this is a really great resource, especially if they have that attached to their course in those cases. They are, again, free to students, and again, you can see our usage numbers really exploded this semester as well for our SI. So we've seen 1,711 students through our SI program, which is up 74%. We've had over 4,600 visits to our SI sessions, and that's up 82%. So if you do not know if a student is, your child has an SI, you can go online to see on our website to kind of look at the current list and when those SI sessions are held, because it does detail what days of the week as well as the times. Every once in a while, our SI leaders will also announce to a class that they're having an extra review session, maybe for a test or an exam that's coming up. So students should also listen in class very carefully to know if those extra review sessions are happening in those cases. Other services within the Reliable Learning Center, if a student I did have a question that Mark just brought up to me. It says, if a student drops a class but wants to attend the SI session to help prepare for retaking the class the next semester, can he or she do so, and could it be beneficial in that way? I would say yes to that. We don't restrict students. It is an open classroom, so students just kind of anonymously come in. We do take attendance into those, but they can list those names down to hear those. because the student leader is doing that anyway. So if a student is kind of looking and is going to withdraw and say, well, I wonder what's still coming up in the class to help me prepare for that, we feel that that's definitely something that they can attend. We're not going to restrict them whatsoever to do that. Okay. So going back to the next slide that I have in there, what also happens in our Learning Center if the student is really struggling overall. And so if they are struggling not just simply with one class, but maybe a lot of classes and maybe a lot of transitional issues that they're just really struggling maybe of fitting into college and just simply not utilizing maybe some of the study skills that they've learned in the past, or maybe they haven't developed the study skills that they've learned in the past or have had in the past, then this is where a professional such as myself or another learning specialist, we do have a graduate student staff that also does academic coaching and counseling, but this is really a conversational process. And so we're not going to necessarily detail and look at content of their classes. We're going to look at their approach to the classes and look at what kind of things do they need to do in order to be successful in all of their classes. And so common topics that we talk about is time management and being accountable to either themselves or somebody else. We'll talk about different learning strategies that can be utilized by that student, and maybe they're very specific to that student. Different study skills that they need to develop, looking at their organizational skills of how they're organizing themselves, their materials, as well as their time, setting goals and developing plans of how to achieve those, as well as just navigating the whole university system. So if they have questions about what happens if, that academic coach or academic counselor can deal with this. This can be a one-time thing where a student comes in and just simply talks about what struggles they're having and needs some ideas about maybe one specific idea, but it can be an ongoing thing where it's maybe a half-hour meeting once a week just to have that accountability partner to help them stay on top of things along the way. This is, again, a free service to a student, so they don't have any additional charges. These can be arranged just by calling our main office, and that number will be at the end of our session as well. And they can just simply say that they're interested in academic coaching and want to talk to somebody about that, and then they'll set them up with a half-hour meeting to talk about that to see if that's something that they might be interested in, or if they need help just on a couple topics within that. The other thing I'll highlight as well is that the Learning Center at Ranella also has a class on learning strategies for college success. It is a 2-credit-hour class. It's called EDT 110. It is taken for a grade, so oftentimes this can be a nice addition to a student's schedule because it is a graded class that can help with GPA in those cases, but this is going to be in a classroom setting. So academic coaching and counseling is more for that one-on-one type of setting. This would be in a class of maybe about 15 to 20 students in there, and so it is going to be generalized instruction at that point rather than very detailed, individualized type of help in a counseling session. So in this learning strategies class, they talk about learning strategies. They talk about metacognition strategies of how to improve long-term memory and memory type of exercises, different study strategies, time management strategies. Maybe it's note-taking that they need help with or reading comprehension. But a lot of it is awareness of their current behaviors and thought processes, and if there needs to be a change, how do they change that? Oftentimes we have a struggle with students is that they have these habits that they are really struggling to break. And so we can't break them all at once. We want to look at small steps to kind of improve those strategies and those current behaviors rather than expecting students to just simply turn their whole life around of how they approach things. We know that's not necessarily feasible for a student. So in that class, we look at kind of developmental steps to improve the student so it can be helpful to them during that current semester. But what we're hoping is for future classes that they take also that they're going to be able to utilize some of those strategies for future semesters. This is a class that we actually have to enroll students in. The student cannot go online and enroll in it themselves. And so again, if this is something that a student is interested in for the spring semester, they can contact our office and they will be set up then with an individual who organizes the class and organizes enrollment for that class. It is a restricted class because oftentimes students that are on probation must or might be required to take the class, and so that's why we have to kind of restrict it and kind of deal with those type of things. The question is if the EDT is offered during the winter semester, and no, it is not. It is a full semester class. and so that it is only offered during the fall and the winter and the spring semester because it is a full semester class at that point. The other thing that we offer is generalized workshops, and these are open to all Miami students. They are hour-long workshops on various topics, and so if a student isn't struggling with everything, but maybe they just need ideas about how to take better notes, then that means we have pinpointed a workshop directly on that topic. And so in the class, in the academic coaching, we're looking at a lot of different things. Here the student is choosing to go to a workshop that they might just need ideas about with one specific topic. They're offered throughout each semester, and again, they are posted on our Ranella website. We have 5 left this semester, and so one is this evening. It's Motivation and Procrastination. It's happening tonight at 5:30 to 6:30, and that is in Shriver Center 310. Students are sent emails about this workshop, and they can register, but they can also just show up to the workshop if they desire to do that. The other ones that are still left for the semester, we have one on November 7th from 5 to 6 on study strategies. We have one on Monday, November 20th from 4 to 5 on test taking and anxiety, because that's getting closer and closer to finals, exam time. And then our last 2 are on final preparation and how to prepare for their final exams. So one of those is on Wednesday, November 29th from 5 to 6 p.m. and the other final preparation workshop is on Tuesday, December 5th from 5 to 6 p.m. Again, those dates, times, and locations, all of our workshops are in the Shriver Center, room 310, but those are listed on our website. Again, students are sent information about them through a generalized email that's sent to all students. However, they can just show up to the workshop and not have to register prior to that. So I want to spend a little bit of time because a lot of people are kind of freaking out right now based on midterm grades and what's going to happen. So what happens at the end of the semester or in the year if things don't necessarily work out or if things do work out? And so for first semester students only, and this is where I'm talking about if this is the very first semester on campus for a student, they are a first semester freshman. If their GPA for the fall term is over a 2.0, then the student is considered to have a standing of what we call a good standing status. So there's no action taken against the student. That's what Miami is expecting, is that their overall GPA and their term, is over a 2.0, and so that student is in good shape in the eyes of Miami at that point. However, if a student does finish the first semester under a 2.0 as far as accumulated GPA for the term, then the student is going on what we call academic warning status. And what that means is that actually Miami has holds placed on their accounts, and there's typically 2 holds placed on their account. One from their divisional academic advisor and one from the Ranella Learning Center. What is required to lift those holds is actually an individual meeting with their academic advisor prior to that hold being lifted, so that way that academic advisor can talk about the classes that they're signed up for the spring semester to make sure that they're set up for success, to talk about with them whether they need to repeat any courses that they took during the first semester because they didn't do very well, and how that course repeat policy will work, but also just simply to kind of investigate, major choice, if they're motivated in the classes that they're taking, and so on. The other appointment is with a learning specialist from the Ranella Learning Center, and so we have a hold on their account as well. They would schedule a meeting towards the beginning of the semester. We're going to talk about what happened. Where were their struggles? Where were their successes? Did they ask for help? Do they know what resources are available to them? So it's just that intentional one-on-one meeting with that individual student to make sure that they're aware of the resources that are there to help them and to encourage them to ask for help during that spring semester so that they won't be in the same shape that they fell in during the fall semester. Students hopefully probably realize that the first 4 weeks of a semester are crucial for success, and so we encourage students, if they are on academic warning, to schedule those meetings early. They will know because they get a letter from the university after grades are posted and once and the calculation of the GPAs are done, and so they will have a letter sent to them about who they need to contact about these holds, as well as to make sure that they are successful during the second semester. They are coming back. Some students kind of have the idea if they're under a 2.0 after first semester that they're kicked out of school. That is not the case. They are coming back to prove themselves during the second semester at that point, though. So I'm even putting on this slide also what happens at the end of the year. So let's say that we've gone through both semesters and the overall GPA, meaning both semesters combined, is under a 2.0. Then the student is placed on academic probation, and then it gets into a little bit more serious situation at that point. And so this is where, again, holds are placed on their account again, both by their academic advisor and also the Ranella Learning Center. And required meetings are with those, again, to talk about what's happening, why change didn't happen, what can be done for future semesters. But there also might be a requirement that they are actually forced to enroll in that EDT 110 class that I described earlier, or forced to have an academic coach through the semester to make sure that they are accountable and have that person kind of holding them accountable and staying on top of things on a week-to-week basis. Here's what happens, though. That means that if they are on academic probation, the next term is crucial. Miami is going to require that they have to get over a 2.0 in that next semester. Otherwise, they will be academically suspended at that point. So if a student at the end of the academic year this year is on probation, next fall is going to be very, very crucial for them. They have to get an over a 2.0 in that fall term in order to continue to come back to Miami. If they don't, then they're suspended, and if they are suspended, they actually will be suspended for 2 semesters. Miami does not count winter term as a semester, but it does count summer as a semester. So as an example, if they are suspended next fall, then they would have to sit out the spring, they'd have to sit out the summer, and then they'd be eligible to re-enroll with the process that following fall. And so I know that's kind of confusing to talk about now, but I wanted to always kind of discuss at least what happens at the end of each of those semesters at that point. For all other students, so if a student is not a first semester, your child isn't a first semester, if their GPA is under a 2.0 and that's that accumulated 2.0, then they're automatically placed on academic probation no matter what term they're in at that point. So in conclusion, I know I have about 5 to 7 minutes left. If a student is in doubt, what we always say is that to schedule a meeting with the Ranella Learning Center. So if they're in doubt of what help is out there for them or what they need to do, then contact us. They can have an appointment with a learning specialist, and that learning specialist can walk them through different resources or talk through the different resources with them, or talk through what kind of strategies they need to implement in order to be successful. Appointments can be made with us by, again, calling our main office number, which is 513-529-8741, or they can stop in our main office, which our main office is in the Schreiber Center on the 3rd floor in room 306. We have some construction going on in the Schreiber Center right now, but there are directions of how to get up to our office and so on along the way. So at this point, I know I have about 5 minutes that I wanted to save for any questions, and so again, I put on this last slide our phone number as well as our website that has a lot of the information on it, but I'll turn to any questions and turn to Mark if he has one. All right, so the one question is, if a student doesn't mesh well with his or her academic advisor, is it possible to be reassigned? Also, if they're, I'll stop there and then I'll deal with the second part. Academic advisors, they kind of have a difference depending on their situation. If they are an incoming student, like a freshman, oftentimes advisors are assigned to them from the general advising office of the college, and they have multiple advisors in there. And even over these next week and a half, a lot of the college divisional advisors, and that's through the college office, have some walk-in times, and so they might be able to even meet with a different advisor other than their own. Once they get into some of their upper level courses within their major, then oftentimes their advisor is signed by the department. And so if they do have an issue with their academic advisor, every department kind of has an academic liaison that kind of oversees advising within that major. And so I would suggest for that student to either contact the main office of that department and see who that person is, or to contact the department chair of that office to say that they desire to have a different academic advisor, and hopefully that department will work that out in that interim time. Like I said, if they're really a beginning student, their academic advisor might be within their college, and there are quite a few advisors within each college that the student might be able to meet with in those cases. The second part of that question, I believe, was, is there an interface between the Student Disability Services and Ranella to support students with 504 plans. Our offices are actually right together. They are on the same third floor. We do not have an interface between them, but they oftentimes communicate with us about students that are struggling. And so if we have a student that is coming in for maybe a meeting with a learning specialist or academic coaching, oftentimes we'll reach out or they'll reach out to us, the SDS accommodations coordinator, to talk about maybe the disability and to talk about maybe the unique needs that we have with the student. However, we oftentimes ask the student themselves to disclose any kind of information to us that's going to be helpful for us to be able to help them. And so we will never require a student to disclose a disability to us, but if they're upfront with this and want to disclose that information because they think that's going to help in how we help them, then we would highly suggest for them to do that, and then we can contact the SDS office with any additional information that we might need about that student to help that student even more. Okay. Another question came in is, what if a student struggled in the beginning of the semester but is doing okay now? Can they receive tutorings for topics covered at the beginning of the semester rather than the current, so they're better prepared for the final exam, which presumably will cover the entire semester? Absolutely yes with that. We don't restrict any of our tutoring appointments to say they have to be covering the material that they're covering now. It's whatever concepts that they need help with in those cases. And so our tutors probably have gone through that information already before with other students, and so kind of are prepared probably for questions on some of those concepts from the early stages of the class. However, I will say if it is within the SI arena, the SI leader is probably going to be covering in those SI review sessions the topics at hand of what's being discussed at the moment in that class, rather than going back to that. Now, if it comes to, though, the final exam review sessions, then I'm sure our SI leaders will be covering different parts of the semester and different topics within those semesters, but the tutoring session can be whatever the student needs. What we always say is we'll meet the student where they're at, so if they're doing fine now but they need help with earlier stuff, we'll help them with that and help them to move forward to whatever that next step is. Any other questions before we end today? There's one question here that says that it might not be related to us, but if a student lives in an academic or major-based living learning community environment, is there built-in group studying opportunities or up to students to set up their own? I would say that's up to the students to set up their own, because not everybody in those learning communities are taking the same classes. I mean, sometimes they tried to do that, and that's kind of the mission of that, but they're not necessarily always taking the same exact class or the same professors. So we encourage students, if they see the students that live in their halls in their classes, then that's where they would kind of form their own study groups within that. I would maybe reach out to the hall director or the assistant hall director to see if there's any, or have the student do that to see if there's anything set up, because every hall really operates differently if they are a living learning community along the way there. Okay. Also, the other question is, can we get a copy of this presentation? And so Mark has indicated that this is a recorded session, and the PowerPoint will be sent out later today, so there will be a copy of this presentation for you. All right, looks like that's kind of the last question. So we thank you for joining us today. Again, sorry for the timing and the confusion with that, but hopefully you were able to pick up things. If a student is in doubt, again, we expect them to ask for help, and so please get in their ear to say, this guy told me that you should ask for help, and so please do so. And so we encourage them to do that and to stay motivated to finish strong through the semester. And if they need help in any way, to contact our office. And again, our number is 529-8741, or to go to our website to schedule tutoring or find out other resources that are available, and that's at miamioh.edu/learning. Again, my name was Gary Ritz, the Associate Director of the Learning Center, and so if you have questions, feel free to contact me at any point. Thank you.